So if you saw President Obama right now, you would give him the finger?
Bestow Productions presents Creative Continuity at New York Comic-Con 2013. Get the latest news directly from artists, writers, and the occasional celebrity appearance. Tune in for Creative Continuity's coverage of NYCC. We bring the convention to you.
What about Michelle Obama? Bill Clinton. Wait, what do you think about his wife? Chelsea now being on TV.
You know, dude, there are a million fine-looking women in the world. They'd all bring a lasagna at work. Most of them cheat on you.
Talking with writer, inker, artist extraordinaire, Derek Fridolfs.
I broke in on Wolverine for Marvel. I was fortunate that I knew a few people that were working at Marvel, an inker that Tim Townsend, one of the top guys over there. He was nice enough to pass along my samples to the right editor at the time when they needed someone, and from that point on I've been sort of freelancing around for different places. I sort of broke in at the same time as Dustin Nguyen, and he always stayed with DC and Wildstorm, and I freelanced around to Dark Horse and Marvel in different places. And after that, you know, we always stayed in touch. I'd see him at conventions, and he called me up one day and just said, hey, they're offering me a Batman book. Do you want to come back and work with me again? So it's fantastic.
What was it like working with a guy like Paul Dini? I want to ask you.
Oh yeah, I love Paul's work. I mean, I was a huge fan of his stuff even before I broke into comics. I consider the animated series sort of my Batman. You know, the stuff I grew up with, the stuff I enjoy. When I write the characters, I think of the actors that voiced him. I think of the stories that they presented in the cartoons. So when Dustin told me we'd be working with Paul, I just thought this is perfect. You know, it's someone that I respect. It's someone whose work I enjoy and read on my own, and it's been fun getting a chance to work with him on the inking side and also sort of scripting off of some of his plots too.
What was it like, really, the differences in feel of Grayson versus Bruce?
It's interesting because I think it sort of snuck up on us, and it's sort of surprising that they were sort of taking Bruce out of the equation and having Diff sort of take over the mantle. So I think when Dustin was penciling it, he sort of kept that in mind to sort of lean down the character more so it looked like it would be Dick in the costume. But as far as how they sort of wrote it, I think they made the character try to play the part as being intimidating like Batman, but at the same time, you can sort of see wrinkles in there where it's still Dick's humor. He'll crack a smile, he'll forget that he's Batman for that moment and then go back to being serious. And I think that's what we tried to do with some of the Streets issues, that he was, Batman for that point in time. I was already working for DC's digital office in Burbank, and they approached me because they decided they were going to start doing they were basically kicking off a lot of digital exclusive books. So Arkham was going to be the first one, and it was during their Arkham City miniseries with Paul Dini. He was writing the miniseries. They decided they wanted some more digital content, and they were going to have shorter stories. And Dini was already, I think, busy at that time wrapping up the miniseries and moving on to doing some Marvel work as well. So I think it was Dini himself that talked to the editor and suggested me to script off of his plots, since, it was right around the time I think we were wrapping up Streets of Gotham. I had already done that over his plots before. And so, I mean, that was a huge honor for him to sort of put my name in the hat and have them, use me in that way. So, yeah, I was happy. I was ecstatic to work off of his, just from the standpoint of even reading them before other people would get a chance to see the stories, I think. And from that point on, they decided after the miniseries that they wanted to continue it as a regular weekly book. And they just let me work on it solo from that point on. So,
what kind of stories were you keen on telling?
I love a good villain story. I think maybe to the betterment or the detriment of the whole series in general. I think a lot of times the editors came back to me and said, it is called Batman Arkham Unhinged, just put a little bit more Batman in there as well. So I got away from that a few times, but I love sort of going over the villains, sort of giving them a nice backstory, retelling their origin. You know, I think a lot of the readers of it were from the gaming side of the industry, you know, that might not be reading comics regularly. So I thought this was a good opportunity to sort of retell and refocus who some of these characters were. And that was my whole focus was let's break down, find out which characters maybe didn't get a lot of screen time in the game, and then maybe devote some issues towards them. After Streets of Gotham, we worked on a few issues of Batgirl together, Dustin and I, and after that was getting close to wrapping up, they basically came to us and asked us what we wanted to work on. And, you know, Batman Beyond was something Dustin was already doing covers for, we both were fans of, we wanted to work in that universe. It looked like the original miniseries for Batman Beyond was doing well, that they were going to keep continuing it. So they weren't sure exactly what they were going to put us on specifically. We weren't sure if we were going to take over Batman Beyond as an ongoing. But it did so well that they thought, let's keep that and let's give you guys Justice League Beyond. So as soon as that happened, we just had to jot down a bunch of ideas. I know a lot of times with these pitches, when I'm writing up ideas, I try to think of them in longer terms as far as like, here's what we would do if we're on the book for a year or 2 years and how we might wrap it up if we put in a long-term run. So with Justice League Beyond, the storyline that we started out with Constriction, I always thought, you know, this would be the one that we would actually wrap up and end the book on if we started out with Batman and then he joined the team and then they fought this huge threat and that would be the end of our run. But when they did Justice League Beyond instead, I thought, well, let's just jump ahead and do that story because that one was the one I was really itching to do. Dustin was on board as far as, you know, drawing all these crazy Kirby characters, and we had a lot of fun with it. I was hoping I could do some more stories. I had planned for a lot more, but you know, a lot of times the companies, it's sort of tough, I think, for a lot of people to get into really long runs because the companies want to keep the books fresh, they want to bring on new people, and you know, it reinvigorates a lot of these titles. So we had put in, you know, a year's worth of stories on the book, and it was time they wanted to sort of relaunch the book with some new people. But you know, we had a lot of fun. I think we left a lot of pieces in play that they could sort of take with and run with the next crew. So, you know, Shazam's on the team, a new Flash, a female Flash is on the team, some different backstories with some of the origins of the characters. Little Gotham is the brainchild of Dustin. You know, he's been drawing these little characters for fun at all these conventions. It's a style that's, I think, very easy for him to work in. And when they approached us to do some sort of 2-page backup stories a while back, a few years back for the annuals, you know, we jumped at the chance, and with the idea that we always hoped that we get a chance to do an ongoing series. And since that happened, you know, anything goes. We sort of pass jokes back and forth and puns, and to me it's a lot of sort of looking at the whole history of Batman and comics and movies and animation and seeing, throwing it all into one giant pot, stirring it up, and sort of having fun with it. Because, you know, there's a lot of these characters that won't appear in the current universe that we can sort of get away with and, you know, feature in our stories. So, you know, it's fun to do something a little more lighthearted. As an inker, it's fun to work over a lot of different styles, a lot of different artists, because I think you pick up a few things along the way from other people too. And then working with Dustin, I can sort of apply those and see what I could do with him again.
Her name is Imakama. She's a high priestess of the Children of the Sun. That's how they called the villagers of the Inca Empire. She wants the Book of Leaves as well. She needs the Book of, she needs the Book of Leaves in order to protect her people. White men are coming to their lands, and they're all very aware of the threat that they represent. So she wants the Book of Leaves as well, but she needs to team up. So it's that kind of relationship. She needs them, but she's afraid of them, and that's one of the most beautiful things of my character, her capacity of sacrifice, and she's fearless, just to protect her people. So she is a wonderful, wonderful character to play, and she is going to team up with them.
So I think in the first season, we see Riario largely in his comfort zone. He's got all the political and military kind of backing of the Vatican. He's counting captain of the Holy Roman Church, who's basically got an army behind him. And this season, he's, in the aftermath of all the turmoil of the Patsy conspiracy, both Riario and Da Vinci are convinced that the Book of Leaves is the answer, that somehow this arcane compendium of forgotten knowledge is the only thing that will kind of settle all this terrible political turmoil. So I'm launched off in this race across the Atlantic to the New World, and I'm so out of my comfort zone, Riario, this year. So he is, it's almost like the trials of Job. He's pushed to absolute breaking point physically and mentally and spiritually. He's, we really glimpse into the darkest recesses of his soul. There's a new emotional rawness, there's a new ferocity, there's a new amorous side, which is lovely. It's a big old journey. And there are a few flashbacks where we begin to fill in some of the backstories, specifically with Lucretia, that are kind of hinted at darkly in the first series. So yeah, it's a big old journey. I think for a lot of characters this season, they're really pushed to breaking point. It's one of the defining features of this series. I think this time around is everyone is just pushed beyond measure, and it's fun. And new alliances, what you were talking about, characters you don't expect to team up are forced into these kind of grudging, queasy alliances. So Riario and Da Vinci, for example, are forced to team up this year, and you never know how much they're playing one another, and it's the odd couple. You wouldn't expect them to get on, and ideologically they're so diametrically opposed, but they are forced to coexist and to rely on one another, and it takes both characters to very interesting and unexpected places.
And that's also what happens between the New World and them.
Right.
There's that same relationship.
Yeah, right.
I think the Book of Leaves is the Holy Grail. This is the artifact. Whoever can lay their mitts on this will effectively be able to rule Italy, if not the world. So it's a big prize, and both Da Vinci and Riario are after it. What they will do with it when they get to it is probably entirely different, but there are various moments where they are at least forged on the same quest together, and I think they're thinking, we'll decide later what happens with the Book of Leaves, but in those moments they are forced to kind of coexist.
It was a lot of work. We didn't have a lot of time for that, but it was hard work. We worked with a Quechua expert, with an anthropologist, who lived in Bolivia and in Peru, so she perfectly speaks Quechua and Aymara. We also worked with a choreographer because the movements, they're completely different. They walk different. They speak in a different rhythm. So those were the main focus at the beginning, and then after a while you're just into it. Costumes and sets, they're so helpful for you to get in the mood. I'd say that was the main thing, the Quechua and the corporal thing. Yeah.
Caroline is underselling how brilliant she was. She had these epic Quechuan speeches, which she would do shivering away, doing night shoots in Swansea, with a kind of many goosebumps. But she did brilliantly, really, really brilliantly.
It depends on how you like to work. You can totally rely on the script, but I feel safer if I do my research. I read a shaman book, and we also learned a lot about Inca history and stuff like that. But you go.
The world, as from the scripts, is a whole coherent universe which has its own laws and its logics. But I research because I love it, and I know David Goyer and all the writing team have done encyclopedic amounts of research, and they glean interesting facts. And it's amazing how much of it actually is based on some historical truth. So I looked into the nature of 15th century fundamentalism, and obviously the characters that are real, such as Sixtus, who is absolutely a monster. He comes off pretty well in the show. The real Sixtus, I think, was worse. He tried to introduce satanic high mass and human sacrifice, which was nice. He was incestuous, a rapist. He tried to turn nunneries into brothels. He was an all-round good guy. But no, it's instructive, and it's really useful having flesh on the bone when you want to, have something to fall back on. But if you ever talk to the writers or David, they know everything about your characters. I remember being struck before we ever started the first series, having a chat with David, and he knows where every character's arc is going to go for 3, 4, 5, 6 series if we're lucky enough to get there. So in a way, it gives you a great bedrock. There's a great foundation to kind of build characters, and I think that's why he has such a great handle on creating characters that become iconic, is because there is this dark mystery to them, but they are layered. They all have, it's called Vincis Demons, but so many of the characters in the show have their demons actually, and it's what makes them these wonderful, complex, rich, living, breathing characters rather than ciphers. And I think it's one of the great joys of the show is the quality of writing for the characters. Sure. One common conception in the late 15th century is that humans were in the sixth and final age of man, and the apocalypse was upon them. So if you were a religious fundamentalist, as Riario kind of is, the world is about to end. So I think it just changes the way you play in terms of the stakes of, everything is about to come collapsing on your head. You better be on the right side. You better be supporting God Almighty when the final judgment calls, because it could be any day. And I think it just, it changes the stakes.
Anyway, I'm the king of pop culture. I know the value of 100,000 useless objects. I spent 13 seasons appraising on television on
The Antique Roadshow.
PBS. Everybody contributes, whether we like it or not.
Do you know about Bestow Productions? We're the area's leader in video production. We provide quality, award-winning, and professional work in television commercial advertising, video for the web, video content for direct distribution, video on demand, and so much more. Give us a call at 570-486-4948 and see what Bestow can do for you. And now you know.